So before we get into the session, just a little bit of housekeeping, just to create a space for all of us to collaborate, to share, and also to ground ourselves, right? We talk about inner well-being, we talk about system thinking today. So I think it's really important for us to connect authentically. I think first of all, it's really be able to see your face, even though like one of our speakers now today have actually a problem with the camera, but like if you are able to open your camera, that'd be awesome. Second one is really understand maybe like what you're working on, where you come from, what's your name, so that we can really connect on that personal level. So show your name, your company as well. There will be time for you for a Q&A, so you can unmute yourself and ask questions. But right now, take some time, share what you do, how we can connect with you, maybe your LinkedIn profile, put it in the chat. I think there's a reason for us to all be here, right? Interested in knowing more about competencies, knowing more about inner well-being in the social innovation world. And sometimes we do feel very isolated doing our own change-making journey. So it is important for us to also know that there are people out there who also do the work. There are people out there to also be on the same journey with all of us. Okay, so I'll give you maybe 5 seconds to put it in the chat where you come from, what's your name, and yeah, maybe share a little bit about your work. I'm gonna quickly go through the chat right now. We have people from Texas, Kenya. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Cool. So let's get into it. We have 3 esteemed panelists joining us today from academics. So Dr. Walter Maswaka, Dr. Thomas Leon, and Debbie Pro. I will go into much details later on about their work, their contribution to social innovation economy, education, later on in the panel. My name is Tam, so I'm the co-founder of M-Purpose, the organization to support people going through career transition and get into sustainability. We also have our amazing third co-author, Meru, joining us. She's behind the scenes. She's gonna help us a lot with the logistics today, but we have been working together, all 3 of us, I think since January 2024, to explore this kind of topic, brainstorm, how are we gonna do this kind of research, how we can bring this question to life, that what is most important to educate or prepare the future generations of change makers. So very, very excited to officially launch the report. We have put a lot of work, a lot of hours, and we have learned so much from 16 academics from all over the world to be able to summarize the findings and discuss with you all today. So let's get into the detail, like a little bit of the findings of the report. I think it's important to lay that kind of foundation before we go into the panel discussion and hear from our academics in terms of how they bring that to life, how they bring that to classroom, how they facilitate that kind of competencies and help nurture that in students in our future generation of change makers. So, I mean, just a little bit of context for the report. It was inspired by really the need to shape a more holistic approach to social innovation education. We look into like how we can foster that kind of full spectrum of human and technical skills that need to lead lasting social impact, right? And all of that create that kind of foundation for a more complete educational tapestry to prepare students lead lasting social change not only with their strategic mindset, but also with the heart. So we look into a literature review, we look into like many different frameworks to guide that kind of competencies. And what we mean by competencies here is a broader set of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors. And so in the meantime, we also look into like the flourishing of the field called education for human flourishing, right? We position education as a mean to nurture whole person And not only do we need to care about academic performance or cognitive ability, but also how can we cultivate that character, well-being, purpose, and the capacity for contributing meaningfully to the society. So that is the framework that you can see on the screen, the framework that we developed to guide our interviews, 16 interviews with academics. So you can see here that it offers an integrated perspective on what it means to grow as a social innovators, both emotionally and critically. And it's important because we put people in the social entrepreneurship change-making journey, right? It's important to balance that kind of like financial performance as well as social impact. So you can see here that we organized competencies along 2 key dimensions. The first one is to distinguish between competencies of the heart, which usually we use emotion and intuition. The second one is with the head, meaning we emphasize on critical thinking, logistics, and reasonings. And the second dimension is the orientation of those competencies, whether they are applied inwardly, like toward yourself in relation to yourself, or outwardly in interaction with others. And what we came up with, like the themes that constantly emerged throughout those interviews, is inner well-being, where we use both heart and head, but really focus on the inner world. And system thinking, where we actually take what we learn from ourselves and navigate through the connection with the world and the system, so more toward external environment. And we're going to go a little bit deeper in the details on those kind of competencies. And you can also find that much more in details in the report as well. So our team will put the link in the chat. The report is live. You can download it in English and start exploring different themes there. Now I'm going to introduce you the first circle. The first half of that key competency is called the inner dimensions of social change. And so when we go through our transcript of the 16 interviews, we realize that, when we talk about inner dimensions, there are 4 layers that often we help students to cultivate, to nurture. And it all starts with self-reflection. And then it moved towards self-awareness, then resiliencies, and then empathy. Definitely the journey is not linear, like none of that is linear in itself. It's really a circle of constantly go back and forth between self and environment. But self-reflection is really the initial touch point to understand more about yourself, understand the personal experience and value, encourage like introspection in the classroom, and the ability to engage with like challenging perspectives. So how does that entail? Like help students to engage deeply with their own lived experience, how they recognize their backgrounds, value, and assumption, and how does that shape their individual perspective. So Thomas, in our speaker, also mentioned about like he's going to assign an essay where students reflect on their life experience and skills at the very beginning of the semester. And definitely we'll have more time to dive deeper into that in the panel discussion. Another interesting point our educators brought up is like really the way that they show up, right? Educators, how they show up in the classroom also influence student ability to do that self-reflection and self-awareness. So once they have that self-reflection, let's move on to the self-awareness, where is the bridge between individuals and their immediate surrounding. How it shaped their way of interpreting their experience, how they set boundary for themselves. A lot of the time, change makers have the pressure to meet like really idealistic expectations, and that can distort the sense of self and negatively impacts well-being. So have the ability to cultivate that self-awareness, have a space to do that mindfulness practice and guided meditation, help students to really set realistic goal and avoid unnecessary stress along change-making journey. And then it comes to resilience, right? We know that like the journey of change-making social entrepreneurship is really unpredictable. Is lots of up and down, a lot of career insecurity, self-doubt as well. And then so one of the interviewees shared that like students constantly say that one day I want to save all the kids in the world, and the next day I discover that it's not possible, right? So that emotional well-being is super important for us to take care and support student cultivate. So one thing that I would like to highlight here is financial instability, cultural family expectations, all of that add a lot of stress on student, on the future generation of change makers. So what is important is really engage family and support network, institutional support, as well as provide purpose-driven career development. It's really, really important and key for students to flourish. And last but not least, empathy. Definitely our favorite word, right? You see a lot of that in the social innovation world, I hope. And so it's really about the empathetic social innovators seem to develop solutions that address real needs. And we're going to dive much deeper into this with Waters and Thomas later on, and Debbie as well. But like experiential learning, design thinking, all of them are key to really cultivate the empathy, help students to adopt that perspective of beneficiaries, and co-create solutions that are human-centered and impactful. So connecting and engage with community and group work as well. So that's wrap up the 4 layers of the inner dimensions. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Debbie to go over the understanding system thinking for social change.
It's wonderful to see so many of you that we've seen before, and we've been working together for a long time, so excited to see everyone. We wanted to take this time to talk more about the systems piece of this work that we've been doing. And the challenge we have here is that the students have to have just this interconnectedness to the world, and we have to build these collaborations in the work that we're doing. And so those field work, working in the communities, co-living in the communities, which happens in India, which I absolutely love, that Tata Institute for Sciences has done, and then really connecting with those students, connecting in those communities to help build a systems level type of change. But with that, we really have to work with our students about this self-efficacy. You know, how do we build their self-awareness and really shift the mental models that are holding systems in place? And one of the challenges we have in the classroom is that how do you do that in a classroom setting if you don't actually go out into the community and work in the community? And that's where we're constantly talking about, you know, if you could do service learning in the classroom, it will make it much a stronger opportunity for the students to learn. Or if you're even to do the global courses or the courses in the summer where you have those deeper dives, because you get to build more of that self-awareness piece and build problem-solving skills that is necessary to do this. But the systems level thinking and the systems change work that is so important to what we're doing, that's one of the fundamental pieces that we're seeing missing, not only in our social entrepreneurship curriculum, which is much more likely to happen, but in traditional entrepreneurship curriculum. And obviously, you have to shift a system to be able to shift the problem that's being held in place. So taking that time for students to be able to build those critical thinking skills, to be able to look at the system as a whole, dig much deeper into the problem and the root cause, to understand the problem at its heart, and then to rebuild out those solutions, but in community with those you seek to work, those that you're trying to serve and work with. So working with those clients and the community members who are affected by the problem. So to understand that problem more deeply, is that ethnographic research? Are we working in those communities and exploring those problems at a much deeper level? And then this last piece of moving from the problem to the solution. There's a new book out called The 55 Minutes that James Staunch just wrote out of Canada. If you have the opportunity, we'll put it in the chat. It's a fantastic book, and it gives you a lot of tools to be able to help teach some of these systems thinking frameworks. Cynthia Rayner's here from the University of Oxford, and her and Francois Bonici from the Schwab Foundation, they wrote the book, The Systems Work of Social Change. That also helps you understand how to get more to the problem level before really deeply understanding the problem before you move into the solution phase. And so building up those skills of the students to understand the problem in a practical way. Apologies for the typo, thanks to our graphic designer. It's not us, trust me. And then building up those mental models that you need to be successful. I want to make a point on the mental models. We all know from the systems work of social change and the work that John Kanya's done is that the mental models are the hardest ones to break. So if we're teaching in the classroom and encouraging our students and our social entrepreneurs to break some of those molds of the models that's kind of holding the system in place and the mental mindsets, it's the only way we're going to be able to achieve that really deep systems level work that we want to have. On the next slide, we talk about being able to access this information. And we get to the next slide? And being able to really show how this interworkings work and how the systems thinking works together. So what I like here about this graphic is when Tam, was thinking about this inner work and the inner development pieces, building that self-awareness, building the self-reflection in our course work that we're doing, but also building the students' resiliency. And I'm actually in a classroom now with students because we have a 7:50 a.m. class. And in this class, it's a traditional entrepreneurship class, but how do we build that resiliency piece? How do we build the problem solving piece? And so we do that inner work in our classroom. And then that on the right side of the equation here is helping them to understand problems at that deeper level, building those practical technical skills that we need. And we'll talk about transformative change and building these together. So the social relationship at the top there, that they build the social and relationship competencies that they need to be successful as an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur. But then at the bottom, they're also building the business skills, the traditional types of skills that you would think you would need as a business owner, but putting that in with the systems level thinking and building those systems competencies to be successful. So having those work together and integrate together, we talk about in the report, and we're going to have some great conversations with our educators about how they're doing it in their classroom. Oh, I forgot to do, this is mine too, the hard skills. I do want to point out, so Tam talked a lot about the soft skills that we're developing, but we still need to reinforce the technical skills that we need. And, I haven't been in the classroom in 4 years because I was at Catalyst. And one of the challenges is artificial intelligence is such a gift, but then how are we using that gift to make sure that the students are still thinking critically, that they're still able to do the problem solving that they need and not relying too much on the technology that's available to them. With that said, the technology also helps us jump the curve in some of our understanding. So how do we integrate that into there? Building, again, the systems thinking skills and then those technical competencies. And I'm going to put in the chat, the World Economic Forum just did their Futures of Education report, and in that Future of Jobs report, and they talk about these same competencies that we talk about in this report, and systems thinking is one of those core competencies, along with creativity and problem solving, critical thinking, and the types of soft skills that we need, including empathy and self-awareness to be successful. Now back to you, Tam.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Always lovely to hear how you integrate all of that into our discussion today. So it is important that we don't introduce new theory, but it's creating a space for everybody to actually discuss, explore how other educators introduce those kind of concepts into the classroom, right? So we are very honored to have 3 academics today. Dr. Walter Maswaka. He is an associate professor of social entrepreneurship at Rollin College in Florida. He holds a PhD in social entrepreneurship legal structures from the University of Huddersfield, UK, and his research interest lies in the social entrepreneurship, governance, legal frameworks, and microfinance. Our team will put some of the links in the chat on some of the articles that he has worked on. Dr. Thomas Leon, he is the Clarence Harris Chair of Excellence in Entrepreneurship and Executive Director of Max Fuller Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the University of Tennessee. He's also the author and co-authors or editors of 18 books, including social entrepreneurship textbook called Understanding Social Entrepreneurship. So we also put it in the chat as well, the link in the chat. And of course, Debbie, if you haven't known Debbie yet, Dr. Debbie Brooke, then you are missing a lot of the things going on in social innovation. Please follow her on LinkedIn because I always enjoy every post that she has on the LinkedIn. So she's internationally recognized expert on social entrepreneurship, trainer, consultant in various organizations focusing on social innovation and scaling social impact. She's also the co-founder of Social Change Innovators, as well as a professor at High Point University right now. So very, very nice to have all three of you in the room. I'm gonna stop sharing just a little bit so that I can see all your face. And we'll have the space with each other to explore more about the details of the key competency that you introduced in the class. So my first question is, we always love John Dewey's quote, right? We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on the experience. And I want to ask, first of all, Tomat, you mentioned about reflective essays and the importance of that in the classroom where you help students connect their life experience with their learning. So I want to expand a little bit on that, like how you introduce that kind of concept and how does that support students' journey exploring their self-awareness, self-reflection.
Thank you for that question, Tam. And I apologize for my video malfunction here, but hopefully everyone can hear me. I just want to start by saying that I think that, and what I've learned over time is that self-awareness is probably arguably the most important skill that any social entrepreneur can develop. And that's in part because when you develop that skill, you open the door to being able to develop many other skills. But also because, and this has been alluded to before, that social entrepreneurs face regular uncertainty. And when you're trying to navigate uncertainty, the best way to do that is to take small actions, but do act. When you act, you get feedback from the context, and being able to reflect on that feedback honestly and being able to see this as steps along a learning curve, I think is an important part of things and can only happen if you have the self-awareness skill and you learn how to reflect. So in my classroom, I am intentionally trying to help my students develop their reflection skills. And as you mentioned, I start out with what I call a self-discovery essay. And we are all just getting to know each other. And basically, I ask them to think about the people, the experiences, the events that have taken place in their lives, and how those have created the person that they are today and the person that they strive to be in the future. And not only do I get a lot of very interesting essays, but we begin this process of self-reflection. And then I carry that throughout the course. So yes, I'm imparting knowledge, but I'm always testing the class to see how they're reacting to that. How does this make you feel? What would you take away from this particular discussion or this particular case study? Getting them to continue to reflect. And then I round out the course with another written exercise, which I call entrepreneurial engagement. And I ask them throughout the semester to go out and engage with social entrepreneurs. Go to a presentation they make, listen to them pitch in a pitch competition, sit down and have coffee with them or interview them, however you'd like, but interact with them. And then take those interactions and apply them to the class material. Reflect on what's being reinforced, what's being challenged, and overall what they can take away from that. So it's that type of thing throughout. I think if I were to say what the role of the educator should be here, I think it's twofold. One is as a facilitator of learning, So I'm imparting knowledge, yes, but I'm also engaging the students regularly with that knowledge and facilitating their interactions with each other as well as with me. And then also as a coach, because I think, as has been mentioned, experiential learning plays an important role here. And so you start with knowledge, but then you have to give your students an opportunity to practice that knowledge. And then you have to give them feedback on that practice. If you're doing that well, you're not doing that as an expert advisor, you're doing it as a true coach. So you're asking questions that elicit reflection. And I think that's a powerful thing for sealing those skills that you're trying to help them build.
Wow. I love that you use the word facilitator, versus educator, or teacher, coach versus mentor, so it's really create a space for a student to actually take action and move from like classroom to the community, to the space surrounding themselves, right? One of the questions maybe I might want to follow up with you on that, Thomas. Self-reflection might not come very natural or easy for people who are new to the concept. How do you kind of support students to get used to that kind of habit of reflecting, of bouncing back between between self and the system or the environment?
It's a great question. I'm not sure I have a great answer for it. I think what I try to do is just continually have them practice self-reflection. And that's how you begin to get used to it. You get engaged with it. You begin to see the value of it for your own development. And when that happens, then you are actually building that skill. And again, it's, can we talk about something that's important? Can we learn something? Can we take what we learn? Can we practice it? And then can we reflect on our practice to better understand not only how to improve our practice, but also maybe to better understand what we thought we knew and didn't understand as well as we should.
Yeah, absolutely. Constantly challenge our biases, right? And learn and then relearn, I think. So I'm going to move to you, Walter. You mentioned a lot in the interviews the importance of empathy in helping students to not only understand the systems, analyzing the root cause, but then design meaningful, impactful solutions and engaging with the community, co-create that kind of solution with the communities. So I would love to explore a little bit on that with you as well.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. Somebody who was very passionate about social entrepreneurship, so I was really delighted to be part of this project. So at Rollins, design thinking is at the core of what we do in terms of our delivery of social entrepreneurship interventions. And students have to adopt the perspective of their beneficiaries, and so that they can tailor their interventions to the needs of those beneficiaries. And I think the good thing about design thinking is the fact that, we haven't got any preconceived ideas, you haven't done any extensive planning, but you're actually working with the beneficiaries or the target beneficiaries so that we can come up with a solution that actually addresses the exact needs of the beneficiaries. And so design thinking then is very, very important, which is the key to cultivating empathy, in the sense that there could be some emotional attachment to your beneficiaries, enabling students actually to get a deeper insight into the exact needs and have that emotional connection. And that's where experiential learning as well plays a key role. So experiential learning and design thinking really are complementary, in the sense that through case studies, with the kind of stuff that we do here at Rollins, students can immerse themselves into scenarios, they can immerse themselves into specific case studies through hands-on approach with structured problem-solving component as well as abstract conceptualization. And this helps them not only to understand the exact needs of the beneficiaries, but also to learn, because it's a two-way process. By working with beneficiaries, you're also learning. So students have to have an open mind. And the other thing as well that's important is that students have to be aware of the environments in which they live. More often than not, when we get freshmen at Rollins, some of them have not had anything about social innovation, social entrepreneurship. We start explaining to them, going through the motions of design thinking, they say, wow, I come from this area or this county or this country. I wasn't really aware of things that are happening in the community and the power of individuals to be effective agents of social change. And then you can actually see them really, their eyes lighting up and say, wow, I can actually come up with this sort of solution. Right? Some of them have actually worked with homeless people, for example, embedded themselves in that kind of environment, which really strengthened their problem solving skills as well as empathy, so that the more they understood what their beneficiaries actually are going through, the more likely they are going to come up with the innovative solutions that actually addresses those needs. So at Rollins, what we normally do is that we have students create projects. We start with design thinking, empathy, ideation, and then actually come up with a project. So this enables them not only to practice, inverted commas, design thinking and empathy, but also to explore their own personal values as well. This was as an element of self-introspection as well, to say, wow, okay, what can I do right now that I know how this person feels? What sort of like interventions can I actually come up with so that I can get a deeper understanding into the needs of the beneficiaries? Then with the beneficiaries together, then we can actually come up or co-create a solution that's effective.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Walter. There's a lot to explore there. Now, it makes me think that sometimes we have a tendency also to marry our own solutions, right? And then so much harder to show up for others and for beneficiaries. So I'm curious, like, what is something maybe very simple that you can that you do to your student to actually help them listen deeply to the needs of the beneficiary and put themselves aside or their solution aside?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think this comes up with really this self-awareness initially, where people have to be aware of the environments in which they live. And then what we also do is to make sure that we have projects that help with students, as well as to say, right, okay, this is a project dealing with homeless people. And what they normally read about is that, oh, they need housing or they need food, right? But actually that project is about really taking a step backwards and try to say, okay, if I'm a homeless person, really, what exactly do I need? Do I need just a house? Or do I need actually a much more structured sort of like way of support, right? So it's a way in which students can now start practicing, so shall I say, empathy and design thinking. They're actually immersing themselves in the sort of like in that environment and adopting the minds of their beneficiaries. And by using case studies, by using actual practical hands-on support, students are able to build those skills, those transversal skills as well, because there's an element of analysis there, because you're basically saying, right, I am looking at this solution, I'm looking at this problem, but I don't have to come up with a preconceived solution to say this is exactly what they need, right? So it's about really immersing yourself in that situation, and then almost like reverse engineering to some extent, where you say, all right, this is what we need, but how do we actually get back? So you take a step back. So that helps you then to immerse yourself in the situation and also help to understand that, wow, we need to work together, particularly with their beneficiaries, to come up with an effective solution. So we use different interventions, really.
Right. I love that. I think it's very reassuring. What you just said is the connection between, okay, if I understand myself correctly, and if I understand how all the things in the system or the society might impose on my way of thinking and understanding, then yeah, I would be able to actually listen deeply to the needs of the communities around me and develop a solution. Love it. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on. Like, there are a couple of also themes that we explore in the report, and we haven't really actually show you like the finding that we have, but we create this space to actually talk with our academics in the room today. The first one is really about pedagogical challenges for all educators we're facing, right? Facing a very unpredictable and systemic global challenges, right? So that requires social innovation education to be very adaptable, to be really fast paced, to really constantly change our ways of teaching and supporting students, keeping the course relevant, engaging, and responsive. How do you personally navigate these tensions? So maybe I can start with Debbie and then back to you, Walter, and then Thomas.
When I think about just in the classroom and the dynamics of the classroom anyway, but seeing the global challenges that we're being faced with and constantly seeing that bombarded on the screens, you know, so especially with students with social media, but then how do we take that what we're seeing and then look at our own communities locally and how do we adapt that for the local experience that the students are facing. And in this class that I'm in right now, even though it's not a social entrepreneurship class, one of the things when they were digging deeper and doing a design thinking challenge was they looked at the statistics of the schools in which our university is based. So our university is more wealthy and has higher income students than what the local community has. And so when they were looking at the schools, they were looking at 90%, 95% of the students were all, you know, in economically disadvantaged areas, family incomes, et cetera, were super low. But what could they do to make that impact? And so thinking through, is there that opportunity for them to get in the classrooms locally to talk to the young people, teach them about entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship to get them engaged? But there's so many opportunities for us to, as educators, to connect our students to the problem outside of the traditional classroom textbook examples. And if there's ways for us to connect those two, that's important.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Debbie, for that. Walter?
Well, I think one of the key challenges that academics face has been, I think, the inability of the traditional sort of like teaching methods to take into account the evolving socio-economic and technological sort of like arena, the changes that are taking place, and also incorporating interdisciplinary courses such as sustainability into the curriculum. So I'm just going to move off from what Debbie said in the sense that what's really needed is to make that connection really between what's happening in the class and also what's happening in the industry or in the community, so to speak. So at Rollins, what we normally do is that we have got a very strong community engagement, a business advisory section, where we connect students not only to the communities around Orlando and other areas, but also to nonprofits that are also operating. In that way, you can actually get sort of like insight into the new trends of what's happening as well, and also new ways in which, because as you know, socio-economic challenges manifest themselves in so different ways. So how then do we become aware of that? And so that we can also let the students know, and then they can actually come up with some of their innovative challenges, innovative solutions rather, to address them. A case in point is that I remember we had one project where the students had to explore potential solutions of actually solar-powered interventions to help some of the poorest communities in and around Orlando. So that entailed much, much more intensive research on their part. And that way they were actually able to know what sort of like things need to happen. And then in addition, that provided the link that we required between sort of like practice and pedagogy so that we can actually fine tune the way that we can actually teach our students.
So basically you co-create that curriculum with also the participants and the community in the local areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thomas, I'm curious about your point as well.
Yeah, and Debbie and Walter have added some great thoughts about how to, as the educator, bring relevance to the classroom. Let me kind of flip that around and suggest that another way to bring relevance is to engage the students in bringing that relevance. So the students have things that they know that they can bring. They have top of mind issues that are important to them that are often reflective of what is going on right now. They have technologies that I may not even know about that they can bring in and use. And so the way I do that is we'll use case studies, but we won't treat them like Harvard case studies. We'll focus more on the soft skills in them. And basically, I'll ask a student team to lead that case discussion. And I give them a lot of freedom as to what they can do. And it's always impressive to me how they get beyond the facts of the case and they start presenting things that they can bring that are unique to them and their perspectives. So they'll use certain technologies to engage their fellow students in the conversation. Simple things, simple tools that are fun to play with, but also they can use to help tease out important things from the case. They often love to go from, the case is sitting in a case book and things have happened since. So they take a lot of pride in going out and finding what else has happened since that case was written and how things have changed. They'll pull up the website and they'll show the rest of the class that website and what is going on there. What are the additional impacts that social venture has had on the wicked problem that they're trying to solve? They just turn it into a really relevant, student-oriented, student-engaged experience. And I've just found if I let them go with it, that's where they'll take it.
Yeah.
Obviously,
So
I have to ask them, right?
yeah, you live up to that facilitator role that you just mentioned early on, for sure. And I love the way that you flip it around. I think Gen Z or millennial, whatever kind of generation terms that you want to use, but they are the one that are very engaged in social environmental issues. They are the one that have a big heart in terms of leading social change and system change. And they are the leader in themselves already. One of the things being mentioned in the report as well, that educators constantly say that like students have very valuable lived experience. And it's such a waste if you don't dive into that, if you don't cultivate or facilitate that in the classroom, because they can bring so much more in the classroom itself. So really appreciate the insight that all three of you just shared. Recommendations and vision. So based on what you just shared, your experience, what are some of the recommendations that you have for individual educators, for the communities of educators itself, or maybe for institutions or policymakers to actually support that future generation of change makers?
I'll give you a couple of recommendations from an educator perspective, and I'll put them in the chat after I speak of them, is that community of educators, of social innovators, we're all connected. And so continuing to find those connections within your community where you live, but then also around the globe, and sharing those resources that we have available to all of us, making sure in those resources that we're sharing or the connections is getting those, like, the 2-day seminar with Daniela Pappy Thornton is doing one with their systems change group that they've just launched. So I'll put that in the chat. But as an educator, if you go to the Social Entrepreneurship Research Conference, which is going to be at IMD in Switzerland, May 1st and 2nd of next year. And even for those that are a little bit younger, there's a doctoral consortium as well. So from us working together to collaborate, to learn from one another, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to take those learnings and then apply it into our local situation in partnership with those local communities. So that's kind of my starting point. What about you, Walter?
Well, I think just more going off from what you've said about actually the community of educators actually sharing best practice. I think more often than not, we work in silos, really. And there's so much going on, exciting stuff going on around the world, that I think we should have an infrastructure that enables us to really share best practice, both from a pedagogical point of view, as well as from really looking at ways in which we can engage students more so that they become aware of some of the issues that are happening in our societies. And also, I think just strengthening or adopting a much more student-centered learning approach, allowing students, because there's so much that students can also bring into the classroom, right? And the student bodies really are sort of like evolving, and there are a lot of students that are that are really coming into the classroom with quite a lot of practical experience as well. So how do we actually tap into that and mine that kind of experience that they have? So a much more structured, strengthened, student-centered approach to learning, almost like a constructivist approach, student taking charge of their learning, and educators acting as facilitators rather than lecturers, so that students can also have the leverage to actually pursue their own lines of academic inquiry. And the other thing as well is maybe strengthening the students' transversal skills as well, that can be used not only in the realm of entrepreneurship, but it can be utilized across a broad range of situations. So I think that would really be a good way forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Walter, for that. Thomas, anything you would like to add in terms of recommendations and visions?
One of the things that I really like about what you did in your study is that you started to name the competencies or the skills that we need. And I think that's a great first step. What I believe now has to happen is that we have to take that definition of what skills social entrepreneurs need in order to be successful, find a way to measure that clinically so that we can begin to understand where people's skills are weak and where they're strong, and be able to leverage those strengths and address those weaknesses and actually develop the skills as we go along. And I know we're talking about using classrooms as a way to develop, but I think there might be other ways as well. One of them that comes to mind goes back to something I said early on, and that's the role of the coach. I think a coach can truly help a student, a young social entrepreneur, to start developing those skills or competencies by first, if you know where your skill weaknesses are, helping them to come up with an action plan for how am I going to address those. And then holding their feet to the fire, keeping them reflecting, keeping them working at the development of those skills. And that may require coursework, it may be co-curricular activities, it may be connections with the community. But whatever it is, how can I continuously build those skills? And if you can measure them, then you can manage them, right? And if you can measure them, you can track progress, and you can start reporting out to people, hey, look, our students come in here at level 1 skill and they leave at level 3, which is pretty powerful. And that's the way I'd love to see things go.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for that. I'm going to share my screen again, just to really summarize all of the great points that our speakers just mentioned, and also really the direction of the future research as well, which touched a lot of the points that Debbie, Walter, and Thomas just emphasized. Really, the change begins, of course, with how our educators show up. But at the same time, there's no single educators or institution can drive this transformation alone in the social innovation education, right? So it requires a lot of like the collective actions among like different programs, institution, educators, policymakers, social innovators themselves. And so in the report, we also emphasize the recommendation and collaboration among all three of them. Higher ed institutions really have to reimagine the way that we design curriculum, approach pedagogy, engage students, co-develop courses in collaboration with practitioners or our community, right? And the social innovators, there are training programs out there for social innovators, but usually they emphasize the technical organizational capacities, but often neglect that kind of personal emotional development. And so it's really, really important for practitioners, social innovators, to kind of bring back the balance, cultivate that not only in a well-being and system thinking, but also the transformational change between the two. And last but not least, really policymakers. We need more enabling environment that reinforce and sustain those educational shifts, right? We foster partnership between university, business, and social enterprise to provide that kind of coach, mentorship, internship, real world projects opportunity that connect the learning to the practice. So all of that you can find in the report itself. But the future research, a lot of the point that being touched by Thomas, Debbie, and Walter is that how can we have that longitudinal study that integrate that soft skill and hard skill toward how it influences the social innovation preparation, right? How we can also develop that assessment tools to measure that well-being and system thinking competencies as an evidence base for social innovation education. And we need to engage with students and with social innovators, try to map out their journeys and how those competencies enhance their readiness and enhance the success of the social ventures. So those are a lot of the things that we need to do definitely in the future to continue with this kind of topic. So really a call to action for everybody in the room, not only educators, but really we must reimagine not just what we teach, how we show up, really embrace that cultivation of inner well-being as well as system thinking, both the head and the heart, if you still remember that kind of framework, really to help students and future generations of change makers to lead social ventures, lead with integrity, compassion, and a deep sense of commitment to improve the lives of other people. So
I think adding to that is that transforming the way that we teach and we educate this future generation of change makers not only is a systems understanding for them, but a systems understanding for our universities, that the way that the current system is teaching is not working for this generation. And I'm at a school now that has a lot of experiential learning and hands-on learning that's tied into the classroom. And the question is, with those more hands-on opportunities where students are engaged in the communities and working, are they breaking down the traditional education barriers? Are they helping to affect this long-term change in education, but that they're not just doing it there in our individual classrooms, but we're affecting it across our own communities that we're working with. So that systems approach to education and integrating the inner well-being and that systems learning understanding is going to be important for us as educators to transform the way that we teach. Sorry, Tam.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Debbie. And it reminded us that sixth condition of system change, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we need to embrace ourselves as the architects of this transformative change. So that comes to the end of the session. We're going to spend a little bit of time. I'm not sure if we have enough time for all of the questions, but in case you have any question, please unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I would be more than happy to facilitate that. The colonizing change weeks still continue, and really there's a lot of amazing recordings already up on YouTube for you to watch if you haven't had a chance to participate yet. And definitely join Catalyst now to have more and more conversation like this, especially academics, educators. We have space, and we try to co-create that kind of space for more collaboration, for more sharing resources. And there are also more in the report, so make sure that you check the report. And we love to hear your feedback anytime. Reach out to me, Debbie, and Meru. So really, thank you for sharing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and maybe give myself some time to read the chat. And any question, feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, thank you for a lot of encouraging words in the chat. Seems that people really enjoy the conversations.
I'll ask a quick question. This has been great, and I'm just wondering, as a researcher and author myself, would the raw data for like interview transcripts or anything like that be available to other researchers like myself?
Hi, Leah. Well, we have the structure of the interview, the transcripts. I mean, we have that kind of anonymous signing up with all of our interviewees, right? So it's definitely not easy to actually share the transcript without the permission from our interviewees. So it might be hard. But I mean, if you are interested in any kind of further dive deeper into that kind of findings, like we as co-author are more than happy to have conversation with you.
Fantastic, thanks.
Of course, reach out
Thanks,
anytime.
Leah.
Any other questions or reflection comments.
Great. I love that you guys are, we're not used to this. We're usually bombarded with those questions.
Yeah.
You did good.
Christian, yes, go for it.
Thanks so much for this discussion, and love everything that's being said. And I'm asking not really from my perspective, but more from my sister as an educator at the primary, the middle school level. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts in terms of how do we, you're all working at a university level, and how do we start to trickle this down into high school and into middle school and primary school? Because it really is a way of thinking, that impacts all aspects of their life. And so curious to hear your thoughts of how we really move forward in that space, because I'm here in South Africa, and the way my children are being educated here, it drives me bonkers, really, is because it's still very much, the old way of teaching and the lack of abstract thought or critical thinking, and that's just at a primary school level. And so I'm just curious for your thoughts on that.
Such a great question. Thank you so much, Christiane, for raising that. So I'm opening the floor for everybody. First,
I will say this, Christiane, is let's look to Europe, because if you notice, a lot of the European countries, empathy is put into their curriculum at a very young age, 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, all the way up. So having that empathy and self-resilience is built into their curriculum, and not having the traditional exams and tests, which my students will all love right now and start cheering about, and working into actually doing that hands-on learning is going to make a difference. And how do we change that educational system from the ground? We go top down is what we traditionally do. How do we do it from bottom up, where the students and the young people are advocating for more of this hands-on learning and more of this community building, and also that building of empathy and understanding within where we live and where we work?
Yeah.
I could.
The point of Thomas that he mentioned early on is really trust young people, right? That they can lead those kind of conversations. Thomas, sorry.
Add to that, I can talk a little bit about an initiative that we have going that we're doing with the local elementary, middle, and high schools. It's called Inventanuga, which I know is a weird name, but we love to chatter this and Nuga that right here in Chattanooga. But Inventanuga is really, it started out as an invention competition to come up with solutions for wicked environmental problems. And it engaged students at all those different levels. And what they were doing was using maker spaces to come up with these inventions, and then they were asked to pitch in a competition. So it's a fun way to get them engaged and to get them to begin to understand the idea of solution or problem-based solutions as opposed to solutions in search of a problem. And it's a lot of fun to have them come and compete with each other at their different levels and hear what they're doing. But it begins to seriously get them thinking about some of the problems, particularly environmental problems that we face, and how one might go about developing solutions for those and being part of the solution.
Great point. Thank you so much, Thomas. Anyone else have any comments on Christian's question or any other questions or food for thought that you would like to share? We have 5 seconds. Sorry, my time. So great to see everybody. Thank you so much for participating into this very rich conversations. And I hope that it's meaningful for you to have this kind of space, being an educator and seeing other educators also struggle or inspiring the work that you are doing right now. So really appreciate your presence today. Thank you.